Greetings one, greetings all. It's Steve, the amateur historian, coming to you from the Goose Hollow neighborhood, the wondrous Goose Hollow neighborhood. I'm trying to get to the vicinity of 18th and Jefferson, which ain't too far off from where I'm at right now. I'm just heading north on 18th to bring you a fresh, I guess, Goose Hollow centric. I don't know if I've had any other episodes that have been specifically in Goose Hollow. There probably has been, I just don't remember. But whatever the case, this is a fresh, although kind of messy overall, Goose Hollow centric episode of Historic Murders of Portland. So there's a big roundabout right here, and in the immediate foreground, because this is 18th right here, this ground where this bus is passing by, this is Columbia Street. And kind of the next street on the other side of the roundabout is Jefferson Street. And it did say specifically that the subject in this case was discovered roughly near 18th and Jefferson, and it was near a roundabout, which, of course, there is a jumbo-sized roundabout here today. So from anywhere from here to over on the other side there is where this individual was discovered. And the particular individual found here in the vicinity of Jefferson and 18th, the roundabout, so to speak. This guy was named Peter Beauchene. It's B-E-A-U-C-H-E-N-E. I'm thinking it was Beauchene was how you pronounce the guy's last name. And somewhere here, literally it could have been from anywhere from here to all the way around to the other side here. Peter Beauchene's body was discovered right around midnight, August 22nd, 1902. He was just flopped onto his side. He'd been beaten about the face. He'd been really severely injured in his temple, which it would later be determined that was the actual cause of death, was the trauma to his temple. And it's a little, that's kind of how it was described. It was almost made like someone just killed him out here and he was just kind of left there, and eventually somebody found his body. But I don't think it was quite that disconnected or desolate. And here's how the interior of the, almost looks like you're at the beach or something. But I don't think it was quite that clean cut. I think it was more like, it was generally known pretty quickly that he was dead, you know, in those circumstances in which he was discovered. It wasn't like his body had just been left there for hours for someone to find. So here's what happened, as far as I could put it together, because this was a messy story, complete with a lot of messy dudes involved. So my deepest apologies if I have to glance at the notes a few times, but apparently there was like 6 people mixed up in this whole thing, Peter Beauchene being one of them. But roughly around 11:30 p.m. on August 22nd, 1902, Beauchene was in this area of 18th and Jefferson. He'd just been bouncing around some saloons with 5 other dudes, and these guys were all apparently pretty drunk, and they were just like sitting on a curb. They just said all just kind of, they were just kind of like all sitting there drunk, sitting on a curbstone. It's a comedic situation when you think about it. If only murder wasn't mixed up in all this. So there was Peter Beauchene, And along with them was a guy named John King and a guy named Joe Del Schneider. And I know that one of the oldest buildings in Portland is called the Del Schneider Building. And that's just a distinct enough name that I wonder if Joe Del Schneider is part of. My apologies. And furthermore, there was also a man named John O'Keefe who was there, who, hell yeah, brother. John O'Keefe will be addressed more later in this story. And then there was a guy named Andrew White and his brother, Bull White. That was his nickname. He was known as Bull White. So those were the 6 people. Beauchene, King, Del Schneider, O'Keefe, and the 2 White brothers, I guess you could say. And they're just drunk as hell. It's just, again, like just sitting on a curb. And they're all 6 just hanging out here, just flop down on the sidewalk trying to deal with their drunken state. And this is at about 11:30 when this happens. They all got real lit at a nearby saloon, which actually I know there's kind of an old saloon just a little ways up Jefferson here, or at least it looks like it was a saloon at one time. I don't know if that place would have been here in 1902, but it's just I think of that immediately when I think an old saloon in the vicinity of 18th and Jefferson. Oh my God, nobody likes you. I hate people that just do that to their vehicles, and I point it out every damn time. So anyway, around 11:30, these guys are all seen together, just kind of drunk. But by 11:45, Peter Beauchene is just there, flopped on his side, not moving, all by himself. He is dead from what was deemed, blunt force trauma to the head. And while the accounts of the men involved differ, probably mainly in part to the fact that they were all drinking, and a lot of them were probably a little hazy about exactly what they remembered. But in essence, the stories all kind of converge that it seemed like Peter Beauchene either had come into a lot of money or just generally had a lot of money on him. He was buying most of their drinks that night, so there was a general aura that this guy had some money to throw around. Now, there were some claims that these guys were all in a union together, and they asked Beauchene to join, and Beauchene chose to decline, and that they may have been pissed at him for that and killed him for it. That seems like a little bit of a thin theory, but that was referenced as a possible theory as to why he was with these guys and then suddenly he's dead by himself. But essentially, all accounts point to Andrew White, who, him and his brother Bull were hanging out with this group. And as it were, apparently Peter Beauchene gets so drunk that he's almost on the verge of passing out, and he just flops over on his side, and he's just laying on his side on the curb. Andrew White, again, they all think this guy's got money on him. He apparently edges his way towards Beauchene and reaches his hand into his pocket, and he's going to try to probably steal some cash off the guy. At which time, Peter Beauchene is just conscious enough that he kind of reacts and swipes back at him. Is like, hey, don't do that. Get your hands out of my pocket, you dirty, no good thief. And in response, Andrew White pulled out like a club of some kind. Why he was randomly carrying a club while these guys are just pounding around at saloons, I don't know. Maybe this guy had the intention of beating someone's ass that night. Maybe he was planning on beating Peter Beauchene when all was said and done, and that was just gonna happen. So he apparently pulled this club out and struck Peter Beauchene twice in the head in quick succession. And that was where the damage to his head occurred. Those were the blows that killed him. So imagine, if you can, just right on a curb like this one, because this is the actual intersection of 18th and Jefferson with the roundabout over here. Imagine just 6 guys, drunk and chummy, just collapsed on the sidewalk. One guy flops onto his side and the other guy just beats him a few times with a club. I don't know if Andrew White actually got his money. I would assume he probably managed to get the money, and the fact of the matter is all 5 guys split after that, and they just left Beauchene here to just fade away on his own. And I mean, it pretty much seems like these guys were all so drunk that even as they saw this happening, Peter Beauchene just getting smacked a few times with a club, they were too drunk to really process what was happening and to realize that Peter Beauchene was maybe gonna die or at least need like to go to a hospital. And it seems like they just all kind of eventually just kind of wandered off and left him there, and I don't know, drunkenly just assumed the guy was just passed out drunk and like, oh well, he'll probably wake up with a headache in the morning. But I don't think, even probably Andrew White, I don't know if any of them realized that this guy was going to be dead soon. I still don't know why they all just wandered off and left him there. You think they'd be like, hey Petey, come on Petey, let's move, you son of a, you know, something, anything. But they still just kind of up and wandered off. And, you know, yeah, Beauchene, you know, right afterwards was found on the sidewalk, dead, gone. And all 5 men were apprehended and arrested and brought in at least some point. O'Keefe and Del Schneider were released shortly after being brought in. I guess they were just less guilty out of the bunch, but Andrew White, Bull White, and King were all brought in and kept a little longer. And it's interesting, Andrew White, you know, he obviously didn't really get what, oh. Whew, okay, anyway, I was talking about murder, but I ain't going back to the crime scene. It's 18th and Jefferson. We got enough of 18th and Jefferson. But anyway, as I was saying, Peter's friends, if you can call them that, at least drinking buddies, again, O'Keefe and Del Schneider were released. The other ones were kept for a while. And again, it was pretty, the thing about Andrew White was, again, he was so not aware like of what had happened that essentially he was found, like I think this is pretty much how he was apprehended, was like less than 5 hours later he was found in another saloon just getting more drunk. So that kind of tells me this guy probably wasn't fully aware of what he had done. And again, I think they all just thought like, yeah, he hit him and hurt him, but he didn't kill him, just robbed him for a little extra boozy spending money. And so yeah, the actual guy that committed the crime, whether he realized it or not, was actually probably the easiest person to catch because he was still just going around drunk. And so come October 1902, the trial of the month begins to take place. Andrew White goes on trial for the murder of Peter Beauchene. And he's real quick to admit, yeah, I hit him with the club, but I didn't plan on killing him. And I probably would agree with that. Like, even if he had premeditation to steal some of Peter Beauchene's money and use his club if he had to, I don't think murder was as far as he intended to go, especially with these other guys there. But I mean, Andrew White did have a pretty serious criminal past. So, you know, especially in the old days, the attitude was like, oh, a criminal's gonna tell you something? You can't trust anything a criminal says. Well, you born yesterday? Were you born in a barn? You don't trust criminals. Andrew White most certainly was one. Yeah, his criminal record went back at least 10 years. They say it went back to the 1890s. So probably at least 10 years. And I get the feeling one of the reasons O'Keefe in particular probably got off with relative ease was, I assume Del Schneider probably said the same thing, because they both were let off easy. And I think it was in part because they both said that in the aftermath of what had happened, and this kind of flies in the face of the idea that, like, Andrew White didn't know what he had done, or that he may have possibly done what he had done, was O'Keefe, at least, and again probably Del Schneider, said that White and his brother Bull, like, came up to them and said, like, you know, we'll kill you if you tell anybody what happened. So there's kind of this implication that they were kind of these sort of innocent guys, and they just were there having a good time. And it didn't come out of the, you know, again, there was kind of this attitude that, oh, Peter Beauchene just had a lot of money on him, and Andrew White wanted his money, so he robbed him, you know, while he was, you know, practically, I mean, easy way to put it is he was just like half asleep on his side, just flopped over on the concrete. And there was actually a little bit more to the overall story than that may have provided at least a motive for Andrew White wanting to engage in some form of harm against Peter Beauchene. So it wasn't just that this guy had money, but apparently, again, as I said before, Beauchene had been paying for, like, everyone's drinks. He'd been buying all their drinks. He was throwing his money around. And then when they went to this one particular saloon near 18th and Jefferson, he bought a round, Beauchene did, bought another round of drinks, and when he paid for the drinks, he got 5 cents in change back. And apparently Andrew White quickly reached over and snatched the nickel, which a nickel at that time would have been worth roughly about $1.50 today. So even by their standards then, this was nothing. This was chump change. But it was Peter Beauchene's money. And he'd been buying them drinks all night. They should have been grateful. But Andrew White snatched it up, and this instigated an argument in the saloon before they went outside and ended up on the sidewalk near 18th and Jefferson. So more than likely, that little tiff, if you will, maybe started further hostilities, at least for Andrew White against Peter Beauchene. And then they're outside on the curb, and he sees Peter just flopped on his side and kind of helpless. And, you know, he senses an opportunity, and he's like, well, screw this guy giving me a bunch of crap over a measly little nickel while he's got all this money to throw around. Screw him. I'm gonna do something about this. I'm not saying he's right. I'm just saying that was probably the attitude he had. So there really were, in all fairness, potentially a few different reasons why, you know, it was pretty clear what Andrew White had done. Everyone, even his brother, had seen him strike Peter Beauchene. So the worst case scenario is, you could say it's, you know, a case of manslaughter. He just hit him drunkenly, didn't know what was going on. But according to Mr. O'Keefe, he, you know, said that it seems like they were kind of aware of what they had done, and that they threatened him not to tell anybody or they'd kill him if they, you know, spread word of what had happened here, which means they, at least in a drunken state, were still, you know, at least Andrew White and his brother were still pretty aware that, you know, of what they had done, and that what they had done might get them into a little bit of trouble. So altogether, Andrew White didn't really have much of a leg to stand on. He really didn't. And to his fortune, because alcohol played such a significant role in this complete story, I think that was the one thing that really saved Andrew White's bacon. That, and the fact that they couldn't really prove that there was any premeditation to this whole thing. They were drunk. You can't say the guy smacks the guy a couple of times drunkenly with, you know, a club of some kind. You can't say that that is, you know, what the intent was with that. So that and the booze, that, I think that really helped in this overall vein of getting this guy off. Policeman walking across the street. Where were you when I needed you earlier? So, come October 9th, 1902, ultimately Andrew White is convicted on a manslaughter charge. Again, it's one of those cases they can't really figure out how much intent there was. Booze was involved. He was given manslaughter sentence, and he was given the steepest penalty you could get for that at the time, which was 5 years in prison. Alas, for Andrew White, he would not live to complete that sentence. He would not live long enough to be paroled, because on December 21st, 1902, just 4 days before Christmas, and only a little over 2 months since he'd been convicted on manslaughter, Andrew White died of typhus fever after suffering for it for, it said, for multiple weeks. So it's almost like from the moment he went off to prison to serve his sentence, he got that, and he passed away in December 1902. So anybody who stringently believes he got off light in this matter, all you need to know is the guy died 2.5 months into his prison sentence. So he didn't live to achieve freedom, again, that he may or may not have deserved, depending on where your perspective is at. But strangely enough, there's another little wrinkle to this story. It's not part of the story, but it was just something interesting I stumbled onto while specifically researching for this story. And it involves Mr. O'Keefe, the witness who was one of 2 witnesses that really didn't get too mixed up in the legal ramifications and was a critical witness for the prosecution. So this here is 6th and Harvey Milk, once 6th and Stark. And back in 1902, you know, there's some old structures here, but none of this, I don't think, would have been here. And there was a saloon, you know, as there always is, near this intersection. It said specifically it was on 6th Avenue, which is this street, near Stark, which you can see is this crossing street. So it would have been just off Stark, either just off on this side or just off on that side. And it's September 17th. It's not even a month since Peter Beauchene has been killed. And John O'Keefe stumbles into a saloon in this area, and he's bleeding out. He's been shot. So people in this area, in the vicinity, in the saloon, they hear 2 gunshots outside, and they're real close. And then, a few seconds later, John O'Keefe, he's got, bullet holes in his side, and he's bleeding out, and he stumbles, into the saloon like, my God, I've been shot. So this guy's not having a good 1902. He's already gotten mixed up in a strange murder case, and now he's getting shot. And when he stumbles into the saloon and people are like, oh my God, what happened? He refuses to tell anybody exactly what happened. And I think I know why. One, this guy probably had a little bit of a checkered history. But one thing's for certain is he probably didn't want the police to be called and brought to the scene. And here's why. So just before this, O'Keefe was at another saloon, because as I've said numerous times in the past, people very seldomly, when they went out drinking, only went to one saloon that night. And he was drinking at a place on Pine Street, which is just 2 blocks down this way. And he had an altercation with a guy named Frank Bolger, who was an ex-Portland police officer. The newspaper said they apparently had a past beef with one another, whatever that entailed. And apparently, they argued a little bit. Bolger said the hell with this and left. And, from Pine, I'm assuming, because this couldn't have taken that long, and, O'Keefe ends up right here. I'm guessing Bolger probably started coming towards my direction from Pine. And O'Keefe comes out, and he's not done, having his row with this fella. And they continue to argue, and O'Keefe will let it go. And finally, Bolger decides, this guy's endangering me, pulls his revolver out, 2 quick shots right into O'Keefe. And I don't know, I assume Bolger ran at that point, and that probably happened somewhere in this vicinity, in the street right behind me. And so O'Keefe stumbles into this saloon all bloody. I think he survived, but it was just the fact that, like, you know, not even a month later, this guy that's mixed up in this one case is right back in the news again. In a situation where someone almost could have died again. So yeah, nobody really walked away from this case without a lot of drama, because O'Keefe was probably the one that had the least amount of drama in this overall case, and then he has this run-in later on, another saloon-related incident, and that happens. I didn't find any articles that said O'Keefe died from those gunshot wounds. I think he survived, but still, it's less than a month later. Just too ridiculous. It's early Portland, and just everybody's drinking and everyone's making bad decisions. Like, oh, hey, let's accost a retired police officer who probably is still carrying a gun, since average citizens were doing that too. And this guy's an ex-cop. I don't know. I'm not painting a lot of logic on any of this. So it was just I think because there were so many people there, it just kind of made for kind of a messy overall story, you know? But I mean, again, pretty much everybody, even Andrew White, admitted to what he had done. So everyone more or less saw the same thing. And again, any alterations that happened were probably just the result of them being drunk and not all being kind of in the same mental state. So it was still pretty clear amongst drunken men generally what had happened. And I think probably a manslaughter charge is fair in this case. I know Andrew White had a criminal record. He may have had more nefarious desires, but the fact of the matter is he drunkenly smacked a guy with a club, probably didn't think he was gonna kill him. Like, it was pretty obvious that this guy, that wasn't what he really thought was gonna happen or what he intended to happen. So I think the manslaughter charge is fair. And again, you know, he pretty much did get a life sentence because he didn't make it to 1903. So that happened too. And that is essentially the story of Peter Beauchene, a man who maybe pissed the wrong guy off, maybe just had too much money on him. Whatever the circumstances, he went out for a night with some other boys. They got nice and drunk. They had a good time, maybe. And little did he probably realize that once they walked out of that saloon they were at, that, you know, before midnight, before the dawn of the next day, he would be dead, drunk as hell, on a sidewalk. You know? We all die different ways. Some of them ain't pretty. So that is it. That is the 1902 murder of Peter Beauchene in specifically 18th and Jefferson, the Goose Hollow neighborhood. I'd like to thank you all so much for stopping by, taking in today's video, despite the drama that happened in the middle of it. Thank you so much for supporting this series, for supporting my channel, for supporting me as you do. And if you want to support me further, you're new to the channel or haven't done it yet, remember as always to like, share, subscribe, head up my Patreon. I'm trying to post at least twice a week on my Patreon a treasure trove of different types of content you can only see if you join my Patreon today. All that said, till next time, as I put my life in danger, till next time, this has been Steve the Amateur Historian with another episode of Historic Murders of Portland.